Pop your smaller ring shank onto the bigger one and just have a look. It should be a nice close fit all the way around. Now what we're going to do is solder this in about 3 places. One on either side of where these come up and one on the bottom. Small amount of solder, and the join for the bigger ring wants to be at the bottom. We don't want it up here on the top. The bead I'm using is 16 millimeter diameter, so we'll just perch it in between our 2 uprights. Make sure the distance is right, and now we can solder this without the bead. On mine, 2 spots are touching quite nicely, and this is going to be a riveted ring, so it's not critical that we have these up here at the top soldered perfectly. So I'm just going to dry out the flux, make sure the solder is where I want it to be, and then I'm going to flow it. Now we're working on the outside of the ring, so we don't want a really messy solder join here. So make sure that your solder is touching, like that. And I'm just circling the 2. The flux will go clear, the solder will flow. Yep. Perfect. Quench it, pickle it. Okay, we're out of the pickle. If you did your forming and your soldering correctly, there shouldn't be any cleanup. If you do have to tidy it up a bit, be careful because you don't want to erase your pattern. Now, I set this up for a 16 millimeter bead, but the truth is, it can be any shape, any size bead. And I keep being reminded that there is no such thing as a ring that's too big. So this is an amethyst bead, which would look pretty good on there, I think. And by doing our measurements the way we did, these are plenty long enough to pretty much put any kind of a bead on. Now what you're going to do is put your bead on, and you can see that it's drilled. Make sure it's level, and then mark where the hole for the bead is on the outside of your ring shank, because we're going to have to drill that. I just use a texture Sharpie to put my spot on there. Then we're going to use a small round burr held sideways in our handpiece. Brace your hands together. I'll move in so you can see what I'm doing. Brace your hands together so that everything is nice and firm. And then you're going to hold your burr over the mark. Turn it slowly and it'll give you a nice little indentation where you're going to drill. So this is going to give you the same mark that you would have if you hit it with a punch, only it won't distort it. Because all we need is a small place for the drill so that it won't wander off. So this is just to keep your drill centered. So position your ring shank on your bench peg, and I'm holding this straight up and down. And drill all the way through. So this is going to be a rivet. Now, position your bead, whichever one you're going to use, in this and figure out where you want these claws cut. I usually just cut 1 or 2 millimeters above the hole. You could cut it even with the top of your bead. So stick your rivet wire through the drill holes and through the bead. Make sure that everything is to your satisfaction. Cut your claws off. Take the bead out, tidy the top of the claws off, and then put this in your tumbler. You don't want to polish this on the Tripoli wheel because it'll erase your pattern. And at the moment, it's got a fine silver coating on it, so that if we just tumble it, it'll come out nice and shiny and there won't be any fire scale. If you polish it on the Tripoli, it'll take this fine silver coating off and you will have fire scale. So I've cut these to length. Just brace it against your bench peg. Tidy up your saw mark. Both sides. Then follow that with 400 grade paper on your sanding stick. And in your tumbler. Now, we're tumbling this before we put the stone in, so that when we get it out of the tumbler, all we're going to have to do is set our rivet. So we're ready to go in the tumbler. Now, this is howlite. It's dyed howlite to look like turquoise. And if you polish this, that blue's going to come off and you'll go back to having a white stone. So if you think you're buying turquoise, have a look at the inside of the hole. Oftentimes it'll be white, or if there's a chip or a mark on the outside of your bead, if it's white, it's howlite. So we're out of the tumbler now, nice and pretty. Check that your rivet wire fits. Then you can assemble the ring. Once I get my rivet wire in, I just cut it with my side cutters. And file the ends back. Now, this is 1 millimeter wire and we only need 1/2 mil sticking through either side. And we want the ends of our wire nice and flat. So I just brace it against my bench peg. Be careful you don't touch anything with your file other than your rivet. Now we're ready to set the rivet. Now I'm just going to hold this on my bench block and gently tap the rivet with my rivet hammer. Turn it over to the other side. And we're done. So there you go. A ring with the bead.